Welcome to this edition of When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine, a discussion of sustainable living and what that means to you and me. I'm Jay Warmke.
I'm Annie Warmke.
And today we're going to talk about solar energy, or let's just say let the sun shine in. And I promise I won't sing that. So,
thank you. That's really a gift already.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Free of charge. So first, let's discuss our experience. Annie, why don't you tell me a little bit about our experience with solar electricity out at Blue Rock Station?
Well, I guess, but the first thing I want to say to you is, can we really do solar in Ohio? Before I talk about that.
Well, we can prove it because we installed it out at Blue Rock Station.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, actually, we do hear this a lot in solar electricity that, Ohio, it's dreary, it's dismal, you can't have solar in Ohio. And that's just really not the case.
Well, Germany's proved that wrong. They're a lot further north than we are.
Yeah, they have about the same amount of sunshine as Ohio, and they are the most solar-intensive country in the world. Really, the only difference would be, say, between Ohio, which gets about 4 hours of peak sunlight each day, and, say, Phoenix, Arizona, which gets about 6 hours of peak sunlight each day, is you just use about 50% more solar panels. So the amount of sunlight, if the sun shines on the planet, solar will work. And I don't know of any place on this planet where at some time the sun doesn't shine. It's really more about what is the cost of electricity in your locale. That's really going to be a bigger issue, and the cost of labor.
Well, before we jump into that, because I know today you're going to be like Mr. Encyclopedia.
I love solar, baby.
I know you do, baby. So we're going to talk about... But let's talk about Blue Rock Station and what we did to end up with solar, and then our involvement with other groups in the region who are interested in renewable or solar energy or wind energy. So as far as Blue Rock Station's concerned, we had a long-range plan because at the time we were concerned about the cost per kilowatt hour and what that was going to cost us to put it in place, and we didn't want to have any debt. So we waited a little while, and then we had a big party, and lots of our former solar installer students showed up, and we put her in place. Mm-hmm. And that's been really great for us in terms of our planning and what we wanted to do, because we didn't want to have 100% solar energy, and you can talk about that in a minute. But we've also worked with groups like Ohio Sun, and definitely Rural Action. In fact, Rural Action's getting ready to raise money, and has been raising money actually, to install a solar array in their offices. So that would be super good. And also they've worked with us to do trainings, partnering with trainings for solar installers. And then we've worked with a number of local groups, and of course produced lots and lots of students through our programs and ones that read our books about solar and things like that. So at Blue Rock Station, we're big on solar. We're big on renewable energy.
Mm-hmm. And if you are thinking about installing solar in your home like we did, I think your first stop is going to be contact whoever your local utility is, whether it's AEP or a rural electrical co-op of some sort, and just find out what kind of rules they have. That's sort of your first stop. Then you're going to want to go to what they would refer to as authorities having jurisdiction. If you're in the city of Athens, it might be the city government. If you're in Athens County or any of the surrounding counties, just go to your county and ask them if they have any rules, permits required, things of that nature. That'll get you off to the right start anyway, just to get yourself educated what's required.
But I want to say, you said first. Use the word first. Do this. But first, especially if you're getting ready to build a building, you should be considering how that building is oriented. You should be considering issues like thermal mass and passive solar, and how the building can actually take care of itself before you then move on to the next step, which is adding that additional ability to generate energy.
No, this is America. We don't want to plan for the future. We just want to deal with the mess that we've created. So if you're building, ideally, if you are building a new building, you want to face it south if you're going to put it on the roof. And if it is not facing south, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be suitable for solar either. East-west orientation still works, but you may have to put as much as 20% more solar panels to get the same amount of energy. But we're kind of diving down into the weeds a little bit on all of this.
Well, I just want to say the last time I was in Europe, in France, the little towns, when I kept going to the little towns, I kept seeing that the arrays were on the side of houses, but they were down low on the building. And I asked why. And they said because they couldn't be within view of the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's because God hates solar.
Oh,
so
okay.
We know that.
All right.
But
We'll
yeah,
move
there are a
on.
lot of local rules like that. You may find that
We have rules like that in this country, too?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Things like, you can't be seen from your neighbor's home. I think in Columbus, they cannot be on the front of your house, the side that faces the road.
The street?
Yeah,
What's the reasoning for that? It's
well,
gonna
a
cause
lot of
glare
times,
or something?
Well, it's funny. Renewable energy always seems to be put in a position where people get to decide whether they like it or not. Some people say, "Oh, those are ugly. I don't want to see them." Well, I feel the same way about traffic signs, about telephone poles.
You feel that way about
cell
people,
towers.
I'm
Yeah,
afraid to
people.
report.
I would prefer not to see them. So but nobody ever seems to ask my opinion about that. But with solar or with wind turbines or whatever, for some reason, people feel that they have the right to vote about that, and so you got to deal with that reality. But things are changing. People and we'll talk a little bit about the technologies where these solar panels are getting prettier. So
Well, that's cool. But let's move on to the pricing. And I was hoping you had a joke to share. Did you remember any jokes?
So she
today?
was asking me to come. Well, the only one that really comes to mind is what do you call a renewable energy spill? A really nice day. So.
Oh, that's so cute. That's not a joke.
Well, it's very kumbaya.
All right, that's good. Let's move on to how have prices declined in recent years, and where do you think we're going?
Well, a lot of times, of course, people are usually under this misapprehension that solar is very expensive. I mean, we've heard this for a long, long time. Yeah, solar's great, it's wonderful, but it's expensive. And that was true, not so true anymore. If you look all the way back to, say, 1975, which was about the first time a commercial panel might be available, although you'd have to be pretty rich, they were selling for about $101 a watt. So a typical 200-watt solar panel would be in the range of, now I'm going to show, I got to get the right zero, but $200, $100 a watt, what's that come to? Is that
And 4 zeros after the number.
$20,000 a panel? Yeah, so clearly out of the realm of the average person.
But we at Blue Rock Station, one of the demonstration projects we have is a solar thermal panel that was made in 1972 or so.
Yeah. Well,
Still works great.
Well, solar thermal is a whole different world. Solar thermal is hot water. The only thing solar thermal and solar electric have in common with each other is the word solar. One is plumbing, one is electricity. Solar thermal is essentially leaving a hose out in the sun. The hot water gets hotter. But today we're talking about solar electricity. So let's not confuse the two. The price, which was about $20,000 for that panel, by 2012, the price dropped to about $1 a watt, which means that 200-watt panel would now cost about $200, that 200-watt panel. 2012 is significant because, to my way of thinking, that is the year that renewable energy became cheaper than fossil fuels. And so you might wonder, why didn't everybody just run out and install solar? Because it's now the cheapest option. And I guess they don't want to prepay their electric bill for 25 years.
Well, but here's the thing. We already have infrastructure within our buildings. We don't want to change that unless something goes wrong, or we can't obtain whatever energy we need to make it work. So I don't blame people for not wanting to race out and change their energy source. But then all the new buildings, all the new housing, none of that is going that direction in any big mass, and that's where I put the blame.
Well, it's starting. In fact, California just passed a law that all new construction Every new building has to have solar.
Well, Hawaii did too, but
Hawaii.
here we are. It's still.
Well, we're not Ohio, we're not Hawaii, we're not California, we're Ohio.
That's right.
We're a few years behind.
Like a century.
Okay, be nice to Ohio.
I love Ohio.
So, but the prices continue to drop. 2012 was that watershed year where it became cheaper, but you had to essentially allocate that over a 25-year lifespan. Today, in fact, I looked up on the internet, I can buy solar panels right now for 50 cents a watt. So you're looking at a 300-watt panel for $150. So that's remarkable.
Right. But one of the things that people often ask in conversation is, well, how many panels do I need? And, of course, we can't answer that question, but just because I don't have any sense when you say that is what does that mean, 300?
Sure.
Watts.
Well, typically, the average U.S. home, if you're talking about a suburban home, uses in the neighborhood of about 900 kilowatt hours a month. So if you want to check your electric bill and find out if you're average, which of course we all want to be, then if your bill is for 900 kilowatt hours per month, then you're about average. And to in a typical location like Ohio, you would need about a 6,000 watt array to service that 900 kilowatt hours per month. So 600 watts or 6,000 watts, a 6 kW system as they would refer to it. Now you're talking about if it's a 300 watt panel, you'd be looking at 20 panels. So that would be a fairly typical installation in a residential setting. Commercial settings much larger.
Can you say something about the fact, though, that we wouldn't really want to generate 100% of our energy from that array if we're still going to be connected to the electric company's hardware?
Right. Well, and that often comes into play if your utility is not all that keen about letting you sell solar electricity back to the grid. The only reason they do it is, well, I shouldn't say the only reason, but one of the main reasons is it's the law. And the
that's
state,
a good reason.
Yes, and the state said, okay, if you want to be a utility here in the state of Ohio, you have to accept excess solar power back from your subscribers. But it's only from consumers, and if you produce more energy than you consume, you're no longer a consumer. Now you're a producer. And the utility will treat you as if you were a competing utility, not as a consumer. So it's a technicality that allows them not to comply with the net metering law, which forces them to sell energy back. So when you're sizing your system, you might want to make sure that you do not size it large enough that you overproduce over the course of a year, because that may cause you some problems.
And net metering means that I put in a solar array system for electricity, but I don't have any way to store that energy. So I'm going to hook up to the electric company's power system. So when my system isn't generating electricity or something goes wrong, I have a backup from that system. That's what net metering is. And then I'm going to sell. So this month I generate too much electricity, so I'm going to sell that back to the electric company. But next month I maybe don't generate enough, and I buy energy from them. And then at the end of the year, everything gets added up, and then I might be okay, or I might have generated too much electricity.
Just a reminder, you are listening to When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine with Jay and Annie Warmke. And we like to remind you each week that it is the end of the world as we know it, and thank God. So, and that little bit is we're always just saying that the end of the world as we know it, the world as we know it is not sustainable. So we're moving in that right direction. So, Annie, you were talking about net metering, and yes, what that does mean essentially is you're using the grid like a giant battery. So when you're producing
the
more,
electric company's equipment,
right? When you produce more power than you're using at the moment, you store it in quotes on the grid. It's not really being stored; it's being used by your next door neighbor. But it goes onto the grid, and then when you need power, such as at night when the sun is not shining, then you pull it from the grid. And when you send it to the grid, your meter runs backwards. When you pull it from the grid, your meter runs forward, and you pay just the net amount. And ideally, you've sized it so your bill comes out close to zero. That's the whole idea there.
So how do you think Mr. Trump's tariffs are going to affect this process of installation and getting people energized to use renewable energy?
Well, that was a big, there was a lot of noise and thunder about that. I guess what you have to understand is the solar panels themselves are only about a third of the cost of the equipment when you install a system. You have racks, you have wire, you have connecting disconnects, things like that. So the panels are about a third of it. And then, of course, labor and profit, that's going to be about another the same as what the equipment would cost. So you're really only looking at about a 15% or a 25% increase on the price of panels, which are only about 1/6 of the total system cost. So the effect is pretty negligible. It might kick up the price maybe 7 or 8%. So not really a deal killer.
Well, what about the frame, though, you called? So, for example, I want to have a system that is going to require quite a lot of a frame that holds those panels in place. Mm-hmm. That's metal. That's steel. Well,
yeah, the racking and all of that may be affected, although most of that's going to be aluminum. I'm not quite sure, if the tariffs affect aluminum. I'm not an expert on that. But, tariffs, they increase the price on everything. So we will see a bit of that. Although we have been seeing solar prices declining 15 to 20% a year. So even if it increased the cost 10 or 15%, you're probably that's going to mean that solar prices do not decline as rapidly as they have in the past. Mm-hmm. So solar is a great deal right now. In fact, the average payback on a solar array that you install is going to be about 7 or 8 years for a 25-year system.
I think that's hysterical that we talk about payback because nobody buys a refrigerator or an air conditioner or a bed and says, how long till I get a payback from this purchase? But it's one of those marketing techniques that I feel like has been used to sort of make us afraid or skeptical about renewable energy.
I know. I'm still waiting for our driveway to pay for itself.
Yeah,
it's
right.
Such a slacker.
Or the dog.
Oh, yeah, the dog. That's a lost cause. So the prices have been really dramatically come back. As we mentioned, we installed our system in 2014, and I was just pricing out to install exactly the same system today in 2018. We would pay about half the cost. So the system has declined in half in the last 4 years, and that's pretty typical.
So one of the things that I always think about when I hear people talk about renewable energy is, so how would I get started? I mean, who's going to design this for me, or does the person that you buy the panels from do the installation, or maybe there's some kind of other organization like Ohio Sun that we could connect with, but where does that design person come in? Because that's a big part of the cost, and how do I really get started?
Well, there are a lot of options there. Of course, you can go the traditional route. We say traditional. I mean, the solar industry as an industry is only about 10 years old, realistically. But you can check and find an installer in your area. In fact, our Blue Rock Station website, we do have a link to a list of Ohio installers of solar that we're trying to keep updated. So you locate somebody or you talk to somebody. I mean, probably the best thing to do is if you know someone in your area who has solar panels, go talk to them and say, who did the job? What problems you run into? Just find out what their experience is. They'll love to direct you down the path and tell you, what a wonderful experience it was or what a nightmare it was or whatever their situation.
Yeah, we should talk to more than one person.
Yeah, ideally. Or you can do it yourself. I mean, this is not rocket science. And for a number of years, we've been teaching solar certification workshops. And a number of the students are really just intent on installing their own system, or maybe their brother-in-law, wants a system or whatever, just for themselves. They don't intend to go into this as a career, but they want to install it in their own home. And that'll save you about, as much as half of the cost of an installation. And it really, literally is not rocket science.
So let's say I want to install myself, but I don't have enough confidence. I know stuff, and I might even be an engineer, but I don't know enough. So could I come and take the class and then maybe bring my project to the class, and the class could help me design it? Or
Sure.
How would that work?
Yeah, we'll do that. I mean, we don't want to turn this into an advertisement of maybe we do.
No, I'm saying, how do we get started for people who want to self-install?
Right. Well, that is one of your options. Or, of course, in the class, we will design the system. And actually, after the classes, we often will take the students and go and install a system. We've done this a number of times where a student in class wants to do a project. We design it, and then the entire class on the Saturday at the end of the class, we just go and install it. And just to show you how simple it really is, you can install a typical residential system with a crew of people who have never done it before, and do it very professionally in a day and a half if there are unforeseen problems.
If the microinverters won't talk to the computer.
Yeah, it usually is the software issues that sort of make you pull your hair out at the end of it, and the actual installation is not that complex.
Let me say one other thing too, is that self-design or self-install isn't for everybody, but there are other options. Could you talk a little bit about maybe the model that Ohio Sun has?
Sure. Yeah, Ohio Sun will go into a region and they will try and gather together people who are interested in having solar installed on their homes. And they will then essentially do a bulk bid, where they'll put it out to offer to any installer who wants to bid on all the projects in a certain region. And then that contractor will get them all, and that will allow a discounted price. So you're basically getting a volume price for your installation. Another thing that's going to catch on big time when we talk about the future of solar is something known as community solar. And community solar occurs where, for instance, your home may not be ideal for solar. Either somebody didn't think about it and their house is facing north, or you have a lot of trees around your house and it's just not suitable for solar. Well, you can purchase a part of a larger solar array that's installed somewhere, down the street, out of town, could be in Iowa for all we care. But they're usually within the same jurisdiction as your utility. And then you own a portion of a larger solar array. And
that's not legal in a lot of places yet.
Well, it's not that it's illegal. It just requires the cooperation of your local utility.
Oh, there you go.
So, and
same
if you're
as being illegal,
yes,
maybe worse.
They'll tell you it's illegal, but if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. And so in many states, like Minnesota, for instance, requires all utilities participate in community solar projects. And as a result, the vast majority of residential systems installed in the state of Minnesota are community solar.
Yeah, well, that's where I think we're going with a lot of things. But since we're, I think, coming kind of to the end of our talk, let's talk a little bit about new technologies and how that's going to change the face of renewable energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the solar panel, as we understand it today, hasn't changed a lot. They've gotten a little more efficient, but they're essentially wafers of silicon that are pressed together, and when sunlight hits it, it kicks off electrons and magic happens. It really is magical that the sun shines on this piece of sand and you get electricity.
I love the look on your face when you say that.
It's
like a little kid.
Glorious. It's like, I don't know. What could be better than sitting in the beach and watching electricity? So, but there are some new ones. There are some panels known as perovskite, and perovskite is a translucent material. So essentially every window could be a solar panel, every awning, every window in a high-rise building could be a solar. Perovskite is a new technology, but it's already being shown to be as efficient and as cost-effective as the old silicon product. And so I think that's going to change. I mean, a lot of people have heard of Tesla's solar shingles or solar roof. And those are essentially perovskite. I mean, I'm not a big fan of solar roofs. I think there are a lot of better alternatives. I would hate to have to replace my whole roof just because one solar panel goes down. So there's problems.
Well, the real thing is the community efforts of people collectively working together and having one unit for many, many places.
Sure. Well, that's the cost effective. There's also going to be two-dimensional solar. So any surface that can receive paint can be an energy source. So imagine the paint on your car, the paint on your house.
On the road?
On the road, although roadways are not necessarily the best place to have a solar array. They're a pretty harsh environment. But really, the paint on your laptop could generate the power for your laptop. I mean, we're going to be looking at a future where the energy that powers the appliance will be integrated into that appliance. So solar will be integrated into everything, just the same as microchips are integrated into everything. Another one is bifacial, and that's kind of interesting, where the solar panel generates power on both sides, so from the bottom as well as on top. And that may not make a lot of sense to folks unless you think about putting it in snowfields where the light is reflecting up, or in deserts, as climate change makes more of this country deserts. So it's going to be a big deal.
I know that there's no answer to this, but one of the things that concerns me about all these services producing energy is how that's going to impact the humans and the critters that live in those environments. And I know that's a whole nother show.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we're finding is as the price of energy gets lower and lower and lower, one of the things to contemplate is what happens when energy is free.
Sounds like another program.
It could be, and we hope we'll behave responsibly.
Oh, yeah, come on, we're
but
humans.
We'll probably be like frat boys at an open bar.
It's guaranteed.
Well, you've been listening to When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine with Jay and Annie Warmke. Thanks for spending a bit of time with us. And as your grandmother and my grandmother and Annie's grandmother probably told you,
the secret to a happy and sustainable life is to play nice with others, clean up your own mess, and eat your veggies.
Yes, eat those veggies. Well, we'll see you next time.
I will be revealed. Mother Earth will sing, and her children will be healed.